This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Styles and I'm a father. I wanted to do a video today just talking about sort of a little bit of how I've made a bit of a 180 in terms of using plugins, some tips for using them, and how I think they actually can give you quite a bit of a better workflow than using a traditional modeler. Feel free to like and subscribe if you want to. Leave a comment below your favorite kind of plugins that you like to use. Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Things you think that I need to check out would be useful too. Before I got this computer a couple of years ago, I was never able to get very good results out of plugins because I would always have a little bit too much latency to kind of play and enjoy it. Now that this machine is a little bit more up to date spec-wise, I'm actually getting loads of fun out of plugins. So I think that is kind of the one limiting factor for this plugin stuff, to get really good results running lower buffer speeds. I'll just talk about that in a sec. You probably do need a pretty decent interface and a pretty decent computer so that you're not running these kind of weird feeling presets which have loads of latency. Latency is the main thing that I didn't used to use plugins for. Now this computer's decent, I can use them pretty happily a lot of the time. So first things, if you've got an audio interface, you want to be plugged into the high Z input. Now what this means is that you basically get as much brightness out of your pickups as possible. If you plug into a normal input without high Z, you'll probably find that you get a little bit less sparkle to your tone, a bit less of that high end coming through. There is an easy way to fix this, If you don't have a high Z input on your audio interface, check the manual, just have a look for it. Basically, if you use any buffered pedal or even an actual buffer, so you could use something like a Boss Tuner bypassed, and that's got a buffer in it. I think most Boss pedals do. Or you could get like a specific buffer. This is a little mini buffer that I bought ages ago. And if you put that between your guitar and your audio interface, you will maintain a decent signal going in that has all of your high end preserved. Another thing is to try and sit not too close to your computer monitor, because that's a really big source of noise, especially if you're using single coil pickups. So consider maybe moving away from your computer a little bit when you're getting that take. Another thing to watch out for is your signal level going into the plugin. So you want to make sure that you're getting healthy signal level. Now, some plugins will let you know when it's in that sweet spot. And you want to make sure that on your actual audio interface, you're not clipping it. You know, digital clipping is the thing to avoid. So you want it as loud as possible before digital clipping. What's handy about the plugin that I'm using today, brought to you by modern metal songwriter Clairvoyant, is that they've got this button that you press and then sort of chug. Chugging is generally the loudest kind of noise you get out of a guitar, so chugging on the lower strings is a really good measure of this. But yeah, you press this button, chug away on it, and 5 seconds later it kind of auto sets that level. I think that's a really nice feature that the guys modern metal songwriter have come up with for this plugin that I'm using today. The other things that you want to consider would be inside your kind of either the DAW or within the standalone plugin or within your interface setup, and it's about this buffer size. Now, the smaller the buffer size, the less latency you're going to have, but the harder it's going to make your computer work. So if you've got a really decent computer, you can get these down nice and low. I think I use something like 32 samples. The higher you go, the more latency you get. Is kind of it's correlated, whatever. So yeah, low buffer sample sizes, healthy signal going in, a buffer if you don't have a high Z input. Those are my key tips for getting good results with a set of plugins, whatever they are. The other really cool thing about using plugins is that I think it really suits the workflow of creating demos and creating stuff when you've got a bit of uncertainty. So the problem that I have when I use a modeler potentially is that I'm then completely wedded to that tone unless I also record a DI out. Now, if I'm recording projects for people, most of the time they will ask for a DI out so that they can reamp that signal and do whatever they like with it. And maybe they might not want as much delay and reverb on it as I like to use. So it kind of gives the flexibility. So I think that's one really key reason that plugins kind of beat the modeling generally, unless you're recording with a modeler and then you need to record 2 tracks so that you get a DI out as well. And some modelers have that capability built into the USB. But you basically set up a situation where your project is way more fluid and you can jump between different plugins, you can mix and match, you can maybe add your favorite delays from Supermassive, you know, Valhalla or whatever like that. And you can bring in elements of all sorts of stuff and create this world and ecosystem in your DAW, which is a blend of different plugins, for example. So in the introduction, I was using the modern metal songwriter Clairvoyant, which is a 3-amp suite from those guys. And it's got a clean, a mid-gain, and a heavy. And I found these tones worked really well. They're actually sponsoring this video, and I'd encourage you to check it out if you like those tones. There's really not a lot of tweaking that I had to do to get some really cool results out of it. I think if you're into the heavier styles, you're going to really enjoy some of these tones that you can get out of this plugin. But what I really like about the use of plugins is that you actually are in a world of tweaking that looks a bit more familiar. One of the downsides of most modeling is that on the units themselves with their little screens and stuff, you don't necessarily get the same skeuomorphic experience that you get out of a plugin. And that's the really neat feature out of a lot of these plugins, is they can transport you to a feeling of being a little bit more with the gear. That's why they spend so much time, for instance, you know, making skins that look like their counterparts in the real world. When you see, you know, various plugin companies like Universal Audio or Amplitude, or all these kinds of companies, they spend time on the skins and stuff because it does make a real difference, I think, when it comes to tweaking these things if they look a bit like what you're used to in the real world. And that's instead of just a world of noughts and ones and a a digital world, to have it look something like what it would look like in the analog world, I think is really helpful. Another cool thing about using plugins in the DAW is that you can actually create more out of one part. So for instance, in the introduction where I've got a kind of double tracked guitar part, I actually didn't double track it. What I've got going on is on the left hand side I'm using the high gain amp from Clairvoyant, and on the right hand side I'm using the, is that right? Yeah, on the right hand side I'm using the mid gain amp from Clairvoyant, and because the two amp sims are different, essentially you then get the feeling of it being stereo tracked, which is a pretty cool way to demo stuff. And yeah, it's a way that you can layer up parts and create tones that you wouldn't be able to do with just one modeler track. So you can build up these more textured guitar tones by using multiple instances of the same take, but with different settings on each plugin. A really useful feature, I find. Another really cool thing about the Clairvoyant plugin specifically is that you've got this oversampling setting, which can go as high as 16 times, which is Axe Effects level, which I really appreciate. What this essentially might mean, some of you may hear less aliasing in this plugin if you were to go through the settings. And what this digital aliasing is essentially a thing which, once you get above the Nyquist level, the sound waves start to ripple back down, and so when you're playing kind of higher notes, you get this sort of mirroring underneath, which is going the opposite way. And it's hard to explain, but if you hear it, you hear it. If you don't, sometimes I don't. But essentially it will mean that the higher the oversampling, the clearer it's going to sound in your mix, because there's less of this kind of digital aliasing happening that's going to be way under the scope of being audible, and it's going to give you cleaner mixes and cleaner audio. Those are just some of the reasons that I think that plugins beat modelers. I'm going to show you the actual plugin here, just give you a quick kind of run through. I created some tones for the guys, Modern Metal Songwriter, so you can check that out if you want to. But I really enjoyed the tones out of it. You've got a bunch of features in there that I think you may enjoy if you're into the heavier styles, so go give that a check out and go thank those guys for paying for some nappies for a while. Okay, so here's Modern Metal Songwriter Clairvoyant, and as you pull it up, so what you'll hear is because I'm sat quite close to the monitor here to make this video, this is what I was talking about earlier, where if I was actually recording a take, I would either angle myself away a bit try and find that sweet spot, or I would potentially move way further away from the screen because I'm recording with single coils. One of the key features here, as you plug this thing in, press button and chug for 5 seconds to set input level. This is a really cool feature because it basically sets the sweet spot for you. You've got, essentially 3 different amps here. So you've got low, mid, and heavy. And some really nice kind of reverb stuff going on as well. And a really quite cool delay. Which can go ping pong. And this cool feature over here, which I'll set to 16, this is the highest quality that you can get, essentially. Axe Effects is the only thing that can go this high oversampling. And in a mix, you probably wouldn't necessarily hear it, but it should mean that if you've got lots of layers, it stays a bit cleaner in a mix overall. And it would matter most on these heaviest kind of tones. I think you can hear that there. You hear that in the low end there's a load of stuff. Kind of gravelly stuff which is gone. Kind of sounds like waves underneath. Kind of gone there. So yeah. Other cool features, they've got this enhance thing. And a tilt. Which is a really handy way to get sort of quick results for brighter and lower tones. In the cab section, we've got some IRs, and you can delay the left or right as well. Fuzz, lo-fi, all this sort of stuff. I created a couple of presets for it. Look, it's me. Modern. Oh, one other really cool thing. And yeah, one of the other things that I really like about the presets like this, what we can do, so say you've got your clean tone, without the OD. We could even mix in other kind of aspects like this. I think this is the right place to do it. So if I have my kind of favorite plugins that I like to use, this is something that's much less difficult to do with plugins than it is in the real world. You know, once I'd already recorded, I could decide, well, I didn't actually want the reverb from Clairvoyant any longer. Let's just use this. So we could have, in our demo, to get a quick result, we could have just used whatever we got here. And then later, after the fact, come in and made some changes and, you know, not have to completely redo a project. That's what I love about plugins, is it's kind of a little bit less of a permanent way to record really solid demos. And yeah, I think it's got to be the way forward, I think. That's just a little bit of what you can do with the Modern Metal Songwriter Clairvoyant plugin. I think you'll enjoy some of the tones from that, especially if you, like me, you're into a mixture of clean and heavy tones. A really cool little interface, and I love that little feature. I'll catch you in another video soon. Feel free to like and subscribe. Cheers for now.